Okay, I've been doing a lot more measurements on the Logica, saying that this one is 1410, which is the back window, and that is the distance from that corner to the corner in the other end, or at the other side. From bottom to the lower edge is 375 millimeters. The lower line here is 1470 and the upper line is 1425. The lower line up here is 1105, and if you go on the top line there, it's 1110. There is 40 millimeters from that line to the surface line, not including the radius. There is a 6 millimeter gap all the way around. These measurements taken here is 38 millimeters, 42 millimeters, 48, 53, 64 and 64 at the bottom. There is a 5 millimeter radius there. On this side there is a 3.5 millimeter radius going all the way here. If we go on the other side, close to the window, it's a 2.25 millimeter radius, and there is a 5 millimeter gap between the window and the side post. We have the measurements up here, which is 39 millimeter, going from here to the edge there. 39, 39, 38, 38, 38, going to 35, 32, comes down to 24. Then we have this side post going down. That's a 24 millimeter all the way down to where it meets here. This is from the radius and going up to there, 930 millimeters. There's a 25 millimeter radius which goes for all four corners on that. There is a 4 millimeter edge going from the window in there. There is a 2 millimeter edge on the lower part of the window, on a 5 millimeter edge on the higher part of the window, and a 3 millimeter gap. There is the radius on the roof up here, which is a 5.5 millimeter radius approximately, which blends in to fit as we move along the car. And as a matter of fact, when it's finished and you put a 15 to 16 millimeter radius on it, it should more or less show you that you are in the right spot. Up here there's a 9 millimeter edge going down. We have the radius going on that. I believe we have it from before 7, 6.5, 6 and all the way down to 1.75. From where the headlight begins, that corner down there, going over to the line from where the curve begins, there is 200 millimeters. In between there is 25 millimeters between these two lines. From the back line to the other line going up from that corner, there is 520 millimeters. There is a 15 millimeter size on this curve going, and there is a 6 millimeter edge, and that goes all the way through. From this line where the curve starts, right there, and to the end of that panel is 235 millimeters. There is a 6 millimeter gap in between where the door panels come, and then we have a door size of, where is it? There, 1140 going to that gap. We have where the handle comes, it's 132 millimeter times 80 millimeter, and it has a 12 millimeter radius in all the corners. From top to where the window stops there is 108 millimeters. There is a 6 millimeter gap in between. The gaps going between the side and the black part 9 millimeter, and that goes as well for the gap down there. And we'll move to the front of the car. This width here is 32 millimeters, comes up here to 37, and it's an 8 millimeter gap in between. So we move up here, 42, 43, 43 and 43, and there is a 20 millimeter radius going on the line coming up here. Then we have on this edge going along here on this line, it's an 18 millimeter radius. The distance from this point to this point is 315 millimeters. There is an 18 millimeter radius in there. The distance from that point to the upper point on the other side is 840 millimeters. If you go down to where that line is and all the way across, it's 810 millimeters. Then there is a 4 millimeter gap before you come to this air intake, which is 745 millimeters from the or at the top going to the other side, and 735 millimeters at the bottom. There is a 22 millimeter distance there. There is a 10 millimeter edge on it here. There's a 20 millimeter distance between this line and the upper line, and then there is a 12 millimeter width on this. If you take the bottom part and measure it, let's see, where am I? There, the top line to the other side, top line is 805 millimeters, and if you measure at the bottom from that point to that point, there is a 780 millimeter distance. The hood going from that corner to the opposite corner is 1365 millimeter. Did I mention the 25 millimeter radius all the way around? And on the top, probably doesn't show, but that's 1140 millimeters from radius to radius. Then we have this bit here, which is from the top line over there to the other side, 1240 millimeters. On the lower point going across to the other side, 1225 millimeters. There is an edge going from here. It starts at 8 millimeter and goes down to 5 millimeter at the center of the car, so that goes for both sides. Then there is 11.5, well, that's centimeters, yeah, 11.5 from that point to the surface, and then I have to put a radius on it. If we go in another 10 centimeters, it's 11.7, 11.8, 11.9, going to 12.1, 12.2, and then it starts to go down again, meaning that we don't have the same distance or the same size on this part as we have in the middle. I need to get the same curve in the straight line. I think that covers the front end. See the 1140 radius to radius. Then we go to the back of the car and measuring from that point to that point we have 6508 if it shows, should do, and we have a 6mm edge on this and a 15mm distance there. There is 15mm from that point to that point, 510mm in between this point and this point, and then we have 17mm on this edge. The distance from this point going to this point is 4550, and the 1680 is if we take the measurement from this point to this point. And that's not correct, that's 168 centimeters, which is not here. This is 45.5 centimeters between these distances. We go to the rear end. We have a gap which is measured here to 8mm and a 15mm distance, and then a 48mm distance up there and a 6mm gap. I will probably just take the 6mm gap all the way through. Here is a 14mm radius where the platter goes. It's an 18mm radius, and that is 55.8 from the line going there and to the line going there. It is 12.5 centimeters in height, and this distance going all the way through is 40mm. The distance of the back door is from that point to that point 115.5, and if we go on the top, going from that point all the way across to the other side, that is 123.4 centimeters. And hopefully that should cover everything.